Canada has one of the best records for fighting anti-Semitism throughout the world. Canadian hate laws are much tougher than those in America. But despite that effort, a new anti-Semitism is emerging within Canada. It basically claims that the Jewish national movement, Zionism, is the reason for Mideast bloodshed and is also responsible for virtually every other calamity throughout the world. The Ontario Legislature. Canadian and Iranian Islamic clerics gather for a protest.
Shem, Shem, Israel!
Shem, Shem, Israel!
They say Zionism, the Jewish national movement, is responsible for every global injustice.
Wherever you see injustice happening, understand there is a 1%, a 2%, a 100% involvement by the Zionist regime. The same Zionist regime that sucks the resources, the blood, and everything that belongs to the people of all across the world from these individuals, and they use it for themselves.
Zionism is described as a cancer plaguing the world.
This world is a body, and this body has a cancer. And this cancer is spread, and you heard about what's happening in the United States. It's spread to different parts of it. The Palestinians are not the only ones suffering. But remember this, my brothers and sisters. Remember what is the end of that cancer cell. Either it dies and kills the body, or it's given treatment and then it is killed to make sure that the body stays alive. And we want this body to stay alive, and we have to make sure.
Adolf Hitler also described Jews as a deadly bacteria threatening the globe. His solution was to destroy the Jewish people. The role model for these clerics is this man. At the time, President Ahmadinejad of Iran. His solution is the elimination of the Jewish state. Throughout his presidency, he had enriched uranium, the essential tool for a nuclear weapon, a bomb that could destroy Israel in one knockout blow. This Queen's Park rally is on Al-Quds Day, a day of protest created by the Islamic Republic of Iran. Canadian Imam Zafar Bangash acts as an informal advocate on behalf of the Iranian regime.
But what does this stooge government in the United States do, whether it was led by George Bush or this black man in the White House, Barack Obama? He would rather have Americans starve to death, but he cannot say no to this Zionist parasitical state.
Imam Bangash lobbies on behalf of a country that denies the Holocaust. Iranian media considers the Holocaust as a comedy, a charade, a Jewish con job to bleed money and sympathy from the world. Iranian TV portrays the evil, conniving Jew, the classic anti-Semitic stereotype. In 2012, Canada cut off diplomatic ties with Iran, partly because of its anti-Semitic policies. Canada had also issued the Ottawa Protocol against anti-Semitism. It is one of the most vigilant statements against Jew hatred issued by any government.
How does Canada see this new anti-Semitism?
Well, we see it as an expression of anti-Semitism when people essentially scapegoat Israel, the Jewish homeland, as an illegitimate state, that Israel should be eliminated, trying to delegitimize only Jewish nationalism, no other form of nationalism.
Zionism is racism!
Increasingly, we see the new anti-Semitism as being, on the surface, anti-Zionism, but often if you dig below that surface, you will see the indices of classic anti-Semitism.
Imam Bangash comes to McMaster University to paint a more humane picture of the Iranian regime.
I extend to you greetings of peace.
But in the same breath, he warns innocent Iranian Jews may be harmed if the U.S. and Israel strike at Iran's nuclear facilities.
It is quite possible that, members of the Jewish community might be targeted. Much as we would hate, we would not want that to happen at all. But you cannot control the emotions of the people.
And then he compares Jewish national identity to Nazism.
As far as Zionists are concerned, they are perfectly at liberty to hold their views, just as we have Nazis that they hold their views. We will disagree with them. Just as there are capitalists that hold their views, there are other races that hold their views. We will disagree with them and we'll debate them.
Why do you think Zafar Bangash is an anti-Semite?
Mr. Bangash today is one of the most prolific hate mongers in Canada. He has equated Zionism with racism. He's made it very clear by calling Israel a cancerous state and alluding to the fact of how do you rid yourself of a cancer? You destroy it. Well, what he's referring to is the destruction of the Jewish state, hence Jews themselves.
I am on record, as well as other Muslim leaders have, that we have absolutely no animosity towards the Jewish people. We may disagree on them, for instance, on the matter of the state of Israel, but that does not mean that that gives us the right or them the right to indulge in animosity or any negative activities.
The problem is the games that he plays is played by a number of Muslim clerics and pseudo-intellectuals who say, we don't have a problem with Judaism, we have a problem with Jews.
Tariq Fatah is a Muslim Canadian who has written a controversial book, The Jew is Not My Enemy. Fatah is an advocate for improving Muslim-Jewish ties.
Political conflict is about recognizing Jews as a people. Does he recognize them as a people? He doesn't. He recognizes Judaism, but he doesn't recognize the Jews as a people. Because once you recognize the Jews as a people, then there is legitimacy for a people to have a place.
What do you think Jews can do about this hatred?
Israel should call the bluff and simply create a Palestinian state and get the hell out of the West Bank. Just say, enough is enough. It will allow people like me to be able to stand and point out and with clarity that your hatred of the Jew doesn't even make sense for you. And it's not based on anything other than a sense of jealousy and inadequacy. It's a sense of impotence,
When we come back, the conflict between the United Church of Canada and the Jewish community. The anti-Semitic rancor at this Queen's Park rally did not deter Karen Brothers, a United Church member and a Palestinian activist, from participating.
I'm very pleased to be here to say a few words. And the words are, we need you. Your gifts, we need you. More people than ever are speaking out on the need for a just peace for Palestinians. United Nations General Ban Ki-moon recently said,
The United Church of Canada has been speaking out and praying for Palestine. In this prayer session, the Jewish state is characterized as a country that has no reverence for life.
For those who have no value for life, for those who protect their own interests at the expense of the suffering of the people, we pray for our oppressors and those who pursue evil ways and bloodshed.
Salam Kulahim. And we'll listen to the tune first, and then we'll join in together with the Arabic and then sing it in English.
Barbara Lloyd leads the group in an Arabic prayer for peace. Salam. In this church service, Israel is the occupier, the oppressor. Palestinians are the victims.
We turn to you in the midst of displacements and dispossessions, of land grabs, house demolitions, the wall, settlements, humiliations at checkpoints.
But there are no prayers urging Palestinian militants not to fire deadly missiles or launch suicide bombings at Israeli men, women, and children.
So the United Church, for example, focuses on Palestine on the top of its website. There's nowhere near the same activity for those other causes, and that gives some Jews the feeling they're being picked on.
Okay, listen, I think I'm not going to do this interview because I think it's all these are the very typical comments that are coming to us from the Jewish community. We can answer them, but I'm not going to answer in terms of the United Church of Canada.
Relations have soured between the mainstream Jewish community and the United Church of Canada. But actually, some of the sharpest criticism from the United Church's position has come from within the church itself. Reverend Andrew Love presides over a United Church congregation in Arnprior, a small town 50 kilometers from Ottawa. He believes anti-Semitism is expressed as a hostile obsession with the Jewish people.
Why are we singling out Israel for 100% of the condemnation associated with the conflict? And this is the question I keep asking myself. Why is the state of Israel being blamed for everything associated with the problem in the region? I've come to the conclusion that it reflects this anti-Semitic undercurrent that seemed to fall into this trap of blaming the Jews for everything.
All right.
The demonization of the Jews is happening again in the Christian community.
Microphone 10.
American Methodists, for example, debated whether to boycott Israel. A speaker compared the Jewish state to Nazi Germany.
I would just ask us all to imagine that we were United Methodists in the 1930s and 40s, that our Board of Pensions held stock in the very successful manufacturing firms in Germany that bid and received the bids to manufacture the ovens for the concentration camps. At what point would we decide it was time to divest? How much evidence would we ask for before it was time to stop the wholesale destruction of people?
The notion that what's happening to the Palestinians can be equated with the Holocaust, to me, is bizarre. It's absurd. It's very convenient to paint the Jewish people in a monolithic brush that you can stamp onto a very complex problem, simplify the problem, and blame it all on the Jews.
Next, the United Church of Canada considers boycotting Israel.
To Proposal GS3,
the United Church of Canada raised an anti-Israel boycott proposal at its latest convention.
Their call, and I would like to encourage us to take this further step to live into our faith and to courageously respond to this call by living out what we say we do. So I speak for this motion.
I would speak against this.
Others criticized selective boycotting.
The report still brings us to a new stance as a church, which is to take a side when we should be standing in the center between two parties. Thank you.
The movement ultimately decided to boycott any trade with Jewish communities in the occupied West Bank. It only verbally criticized Hamas, the Islamic Palestinian rulers in Gaza, for their terror attacks against Israel.
They don't want to, as some of the Christians say, bless the Jews, but rather I think they want to curse the Jews, and they do it via their attacks on Israel.
Canadian Jewish advocates are livid. Do you consider these boycotts anti-Semitic?
What I think we are seeing is classical anti-Semitism under a new guise. So the whipping boy is the state of Israel.
I think to suggest that the members of the working group were inspired by any kind of feelings of anti-Semitism would be totally false. Their desire was to respond to the call of Palestinians who say 45 years is long enough. And it's not just 45 years of continued occupation and continued oppression, it's actually a continuation of further stealing of land.
The casualties in the Israel-Palestine conflict are dwarfed by the bloodshed in neighboring Syria. More than 60,000 Syrians, mostly civilians, have been killed by the Syrian army.
They're going to kill us all. If we don't help us, they'll kill millions.
Yet the United Church of Canada does not criticize or boycott the Syrian government. Reverend Love says that blindness comes from that hostile obsession with the Jewish state.
This is the sort of the ugly underbelly of all of this. We're not taking moral positions on countries like Syria and elsewhere because of the sensitivities to Christian-Muslim relationships. That's become the priority since 2001, since 9/11. The overwhelming thrust is, well, we have to walk with trepidation on this. Relationships between Christians and Jews seems to have just dropped off the radar completely.
Just several hundred kilometers from Israel, 500,000 Iraqi Christians have been forced to flee their homes. Many were raped, kidnapped, killed, and wounded in radical Islamic attacks. Half the entire community has fled. The United Church of Canada has not taken a stand on these atrocities.
When you ask them, well, what about your fellow Christians who are being molested in the Middle East and are being expelled from their homes and tormented, how are you helping them? Their response is, well, they haven't asked for our help.
On Palestine, Israel, you're taking a proactive action on the settlements. When it comes to Iraq, Egypt, well, you see the problem, you're not. I've actually been to Iraq. I met many Christian groups who suffered a great deal, and they pleaded for international attention.
Christians in the region have not asked for specific action, in part because any one of us are faced with the same thing. What do you do to stop it?
I visited this church in Baghdad with Canadian Reverend Majed El-Shafi. The remains of 5 suicide bombers and their 40 Christian victims are burned into the ceiling and walls.
This is part of the bomber, the suicide bomber. It's part of his body, and just the level of persecution is unbelievable. To kill innocent people like this in the church, and just because they are Christians. And we see the victims, and we see the people heartbroken, and nobody cares. Nobody cares back home.
Priests were beheaded, their daughters were raped, and yet some of these Christian organizations that constantly attack and even call for boycotts of Israeli goods have, I think, never even put out a statement condemning the persecution of their co-religionists. I hesitate to characterize anything lightly as anti-Semitism, but I think some of these organizations really are putting themselves in a difficult spot.
We have to take a moral stance that is not only fair, but applies equally to both Jews, Christians, Muslims. Both the Apostle James and Jesus make references to this notion that, judgment first of all starts with yourself. Look inside yourself. And we're not doing that in our church. We're passing judgment on Israel before we look at how badly we have allowed ourselves to buy into the narrative that Israel is 100% at fault.
When we come back, is the boycott effort anti-Semitic? Montreal, Quebec. Thousands gather for an International Women's Day march. A moment to press for equal rights and opportunities for women all over the world. Israel apartheid activists meet at an assembly point to join the protest. Not for women's rights, but against the alleged Jewish racist state of Israel. We asked them why they are not protesting against the rape of many thousands of women in war-torn Syria, the oppression against Saudi women executed for alleged adultery.
You can't explain why? You're a smart guy. Not interested in talking to you. Answer question.
Yeah, let's go.
We don't want you to talk.
Why not?
Scientist. Oh, trust me.
I trust that guy, sorry.
There were lots of crews covering this protest. But these activists dispatched someone to try to disrupt our filming.
Please don't push me. You're pushing me.
What they don't want to disrupt is the skewed view that the Mideast conflict is simply a matter of alleged Jewish national racism. They believe the only solution is to wipe out a Jewish state through economic boycotts.
A large segment of the movement which wants to eliminate Israel. You want to use...
Norman Finkelstein is a harsh critic of Israel's occupation of the West Bank. But labeling a Jewish state as illegitimate has induced him to criticize the anti-Zionist left. He spoke with fellow activist Frank Barat.
The Palestinian people are not 4 million. There's the refugees, there is the citizens, Palestinian citizens of Israel. So it comes to a much bigger number.
The whole world is filled with countries that persecute their minorities. Do you want to go through every country in the Middle East and how they treat their minorities? And then it's just open season by the other side to show what hypocrites you are. Why are you focusing on that minority and not 10 million other minorities in the world?
The sophisticated battle continues throughout Canada, and especially right here on Rue Saint-Denis in Montreal. On this side is a group that calls for boycotting a shop because the shop is selling Israeli shoes. It's called Naot. And on this side are Montrealers, not all of them Jewish, who are against the boycotters because they say the action is trying to put a Jewish shop out of business and is fundamentally anti-Semitic. These activists have consistently given up every Saturday morning for more than a year and a half. This is their big test case. If they shut down this shop, they believe they can shut down any store that does business with Israel. Natasha Lissos is the owner of the Naot shoe store.
The tactic to me is a form of economic terrorism, as it is so disruptive to people's lives. I feel that this is anti-Semitism in its true form. If you go back to Nazi Germany, the flyers that are being distributed here, it is basically about businesses shutting down, and they shut down many Jewish businesses. So no, it's not a new form of anti-Semitism. It's been there.
No, it's not anti-Semitic. It has nothing to do with religion. This is all about people's basic human rights being violated on a massive scale, about crimes against humanity being committed by an occupying force. It's not about religion at all.
For the past several months, a group of ordinary Quebecers gather here even earlier Saturday morning to protect Natasha's store from the boycotters.
I don't accept that in my society, a group of bullies could harass, intimidate store owners, prevent clients from going inside the store for political reasons or any kind of reasons. I think it is unacceptable.
I just want to show my solidarity with this shop owner, because what these other guys are doing to him is unspeakable. That's indecent. This guy is doing his best to earn to make a living in a decent way, and they are preventing him from doing so.
Monique Dawes and Ty Van Fram manufacture and sell jewelry next door to Natasha. Every Saturday, the protesters block their entrance. The boycott really hurts them, but they are determined to help Natasha stay in business.
I ask them to stay. I don't want them to leave because they will win. And if they win here, their plan is to do that everywhere.
We are very moved and touched by it because we understand the importance of being able to engage in business without any interruptions, and hurt even more that their business is affected as much as ours.
The protesters reject they are employing a Nazi-style boycott of Jewish shops like 1930s Germany. But they do support an historic anti-Semitic charge of Zionist-Nazi cooperation.
Even if I'm going to be a bit controversial here, there were a certain number of Zionist leaders in Jewish Palestine in the 1930s that were collaborated fully with the Third Reich.
Jews were desperate to get out of Nazi Germany in the 1930s. The Zionist movement brokered a deal with the Nazis. The Jews give most of their savings to the German government. They get out to Palestine. It was blood money for ransom, and it saved thousands of German Jewish families from Hitler's gas chambers. The left-wing groups that oppose Israel basically use a lot of Nazi misconceptions. Where does the truth stand in that?
What lies behind these kind of accusations, however, is something entirely different. It's a desire to stigmatize the Zionist movement by saying that from its inception or from very early on, it was in fact keen to align itself with the darkest and most reactionary forces of mankind.
What these protesters would never discuss was the alliance between the Palestinian leader at the time, Haj Amin al-Husseini, and Hitler. In an effort to help the Nazis conquer Palestine and finish off the Jews, Husseini set up Bosnian Muslim units that joined the German military. The boycott has spread to Vancouver. Protesters are trying to shut down another Jewish shop that sells Israeli-manufactured soaps. Again, a Nazi motif. Branding Jewish national expression as Nazism is part of the new anti-Semitism. Activist Darrell Legg supports the comparison between the Jewish state and Nazism, and it has made him a lot of friends.
I felt that just marching down the street was not enough, and I wanted people to know where I stood. And once I put it on my back, my life in Quebec really changed. It was really amazing. People let me ahead in the lineup. People wanted to really know what my values were, where I really stood about things.
Syria has slaughtered more innocent civilians in just 2 years than in decades of the Palestine-Israel conflict. Syria borders Israel. But for these activists, a Jewish country established by Holocaust survivors is the true Nazi state.
Personally, I always have a problem if we're being asked about questions about Israel and their actions, it's always followed by what about others in the area. I don't know that that's actually a fair comparison. I mean, we're talking about racism here today particularly, and I think that Israel's actions are perhaps more racist-based than others in the region, if we are going to draw this conclusion.
These same people, are they going and protesting in front of the Syrian embassy as that government massacres its people? Are they going and protesting in front of the Saudi embassy about women being stoned to death and gays and lesbians being executed? Do they ever raise any objection about the vile human rights practices in Iran? And yet they find their time week after week to target a small businessman because he's selling a few pairs of shoes made in a Jewish country. There's something really perverse about this.
Next, Montreal's Hasidic Jews. Are they under an anti-Semitic attack? Anti-Semitism is no stranger to Quebec media.
Vous connaissez l'Holocauste, peut-être?
Un peu, oui. Oui.
C'était le massacre des Juifs.
Oui, exactement, oui.
En tout cas, pour moi, c'était la plus belle chose qui puisse arriver pour l'histoire.
Alors, il faut toujours mettre des gants blancs lorsqu'on parle de cette belle population juive de Montréal.
Oui, mais si la population juive de Montréal...
Mais si vous me demandez si des fois ils ont un comportement emmerdant, je vous dirais que oui.
En tout cas, pour la population juive qui nous écoute en ce moment, pour eux précisément, et dédicacé rien que pour eux, je vous emmerde.
And media has also taken aim at Montreal's Outremont Hasidic community. Hasidim, ultra-Orthodox Jews, have lived here for decades. During the past 20 years, Outremont has become a trendy place for restaurants and cafes. The two communities mingle. Some have problems with it.
In the Torah,
Journalist Pierre Lacerte lives in the neighborhood, and he has launched a controversial blog claiming these ultra-Orthodox Jews are hurting the community.
Given some 40 years ago, there was 30% of Jews in Outremont. But there was no clash because they were not fundamentalist Jews. They were not ultra-Orthodox Jews. Now, they're maybe 20% of the population, but they're more fanatic.
Lacerte claims their school buses dominate the road. The speed bumps, for example, have been decorated into Hasidim, which is an insult for these ultra-Orthodox Jews. He argues Hasidic synagogues violate zoning laws. Lassert's blog, for example, takes a shot at Jewish ritual kosher food. He claims the Hasidim are targeting the kosherization of all pagan food. We could even say that the conquest of the whole planet is well on the way. He claims Hasidim are breaking the law. He writes, "We have already heard about alcohol trafficking in certain cultural Hasidic locations." Lassert criticizes Hasidic hygiene. He writes, "As with other local Hasidic places, it looks like a disgusting hovel."
I know how to use the words, and the words I use them on purpose. And I want to shock, I want them to realize what's going on, I want them to, do something.
His Hasidic neighbors claim Lassert is anti-Semitic.
It's his hate. Why are you bringing specific people into your blog? Why are you showing hate? And it's just unacceptable. He's a respectful journalist, I think. Journalists should not be behaving in that manner.
Lassert launched a petition to prevent the expansion of a local synagogue. He generated enough support to stop the construction.
He has created a fear.
Leila Marshy, a local resident, felt that effort had racist motivations.
People have learned not to be anti-Semitic in overt ways. People behave themselves. But for some reason they find it acceptable to denigrate the Hasidim. The Hasidim, in a lot of ways, they are the best neighbors you can possibly have. They are on the sidewalks, the women are sitting on the porch, there's children. They make the neighborhood safe.
Leila Marshy set up Friends of Hutchison, a Facebook page and reconciliation group. They met in the local library to promote greater understanding between the Hasidic and secular community.
We are here to build bridges, okay?
Well, then, be a bit quiet.
Pierre Lassert showed up. Many here took it as a provocation.
If you go to the Friends of Hutchison page and go into the history and see the trolling, I've had personal messages from people calling us infestation of rats, okay?
Was it me?
I didn't say it was you. I'm not even looking at you. And so, there is a streak of people completely uninterested in building bridges, and one of the things we need to do is distance ourselves from them. Merci.
Others make fun of Lassert's perceived Hasidic threat.
Sometimes if I'm coming home late at night and I see a gang of men dressed in black, big gang of them, all men, teenagers heading towards me, and I'm thinking, should I cross the street? Are they going to jump me? Are they outlaws? Or maybe they're just doing something more nefarious, like not paying their taxes or littering.
We're starting a yoga group for Hasidic women. There's a book over there that you can sign your name to.
Pierre Lassert wants the discussion to take a different turn.
To make bridge, you cannot put aside. You cannot make bridge.
Thank you so much for coming. Merci beaucoup. We want to continue being friends. Thank you so much. Please join the Friends of Hutchison Facebook page and say nice things.
You won't be able to make bridges by discarding half of the population. That's impossible.
The meeting concludes, but it's clear the animosity between Pierre Lassert's group, the Hasidic community, and Leila's Friends of Hutchison is far from resolved.
You're not here for peace. You're here for fire. These people are here for peace. You're here for fire.
Oh,
and you enjoy fire and you love fire.
If you could read my blog, but you can't.
Lassert clings to the negative stereotype that Montreal's ultra-Orthodox Jews are uneducated and anti-Francophone.
You presented a few girls that could speak French. Where were the boys? The boys were at they're spraying. They're not learning French. The girls have educations. The boys don't.
J'habite ici, c'est le Mont-Saint-Anne. J'ai payé beaucoup d'argent pour pratiquer le français.
Oui.
Parce que je respectais le français.
I am born over here. I have education. I have a business. I have a house.
right.
I am worth more
How
money
come
than you
so
are
many
probably.
schools
And
are illegal, still illegal?
It's not illegal because we teach the same thing.
I'm working full time. He is working full time. He is working full time. Everybody
So
of
what?
us. So where
It's
did you
still
get the numbers?
60% of
you said
these
70%.
men who don't.
You say that again in camera, 70% of us don't work. I'll send you a list of 85 or 90% who work, who have jobs, full-time and who work.
I'll
they
be
work
glad
better.
to see it
And-
because
but
I
you won't pull back. I want you to pull back in public. You said a lie in public. A laugh.
No.
Yeah, you
It's
said
the
a
same-
lie.
It's the
You're
same
a
in
liar.
Israel. I don't think I'm narrow-minded.
I do think so.
When we come back, free speech and hate speech in Canada. Unlike Canada, in the United States you have the right to be a bigot. The Constitution's First Amendment right to free speech has granted anti-Semitic webmasters safe haven in America.
I got surrounded, my house, it was all Mexicans, everything, crime.
Tom Metzger is one of them. He was imprisoned in Toronto for hate speech and then deported back to America. His anti-Semitic Resist.com ranks in the top 5% of websites worldwide.
Well, this is the only country left in the world where you have a reasonable amount of free speech. That's all there is to it. Any other country, what I say, I'd be in jail. I mean, over even a lot less than what I say. I'd be in court every day in Canada.
And what do you think about laws on free speech or the limitation of it in Canada, where basically you could be put into jail for what you do?
Well, Canada, to me, I think you're freer in Russia now than Canada. I mean, you're free to do what they want you to do. Whatever society and power people think it's okay to do, you're free. I have lots of friends in Canada, and lots of them have been to jail and prison and so forth for saying a lot less than what I say.
Tom Winnecke is one of them. He was sentenced to 9 months in prison for failing to cease and desist from posting anti-Semitic comments online. Winnecke agreed to a Skype interview.
Jews have a lot of power. Whether people believe it or not, it's true. And then you had Canadian Jewish Congress, Canadian Civil Liberties Association, Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center. And it's very clear that they have involvement in stifling free speech, or they have involvement in, bailing out bankers. I've been sent to prison for the things I've said. It cost me a lot of money, that's for sure.
Richard Warman is a human rights lawyer who initiated the case against Tom Winnecke.
The kind of material that he was posting out onto a U.S. neo-Nazi forum called Vanguard News was some of the most vicious and evil anti-Semitic material that I've seen in a long time. It characterized Jews as basically parasitical coming into the country, infesting the country with blacks.
Vanguard News Forum, where Winnecke posted his views, is ranked in the top 1% of websites, according to the rating agency Alexa.
When they do resist,
Alex Linder runs the site from the safety of American soil in Kirksville, Missouri.
Jail. Your own country, Canada, an example is Tom Winnecke. If he was sentenced to 9 months for simply writing about racial crime in Toronto, we're saying, look, the people that are causing the crime in Toronto are the Jamaicans and the other colored gangsters. And for that, you get thrown in jail? And the scary thing to me, from your perspective as a Canadian TV show, is that most Canadians actually support this.
How do you believe you can solve this problem with the Jews?
The solution to the problem is ultimately to exterminate them.
Alex Linder would be imprisoned in Canada for those comments.
The United States has its own particular jurisprudence on freedom of expression. In Canada, it seems on the face of it that would clearly run afoul of the hate crimes provisions of our criminal code. It's entirely possible for Canada to continue standing up as the world leader, I believe, in combating anti-Semitism and other forms of hatred without compromising our ancient belief in freedom of expression.
Richard Warman is taking on some tough characters when he combats hate crimes, and he has paid a price for his success.
There's been death threats, there's been defamation, there have been publication of my home address, there have been any number of things calling for my death.
Winnipeg is home to one of the most popular global bloggers warning against an alleged Jewish conspiracy to rule the world. HenryMakow.com is ranked at approximately 60,000 of over 180 million active websites worldwide, a very high popularity ranking. He agreed to meet us on the shores of the Assiniboine River.
I don't believe Judaism is a religion. I think it's a satanic cult masquerading as a religion. Because this cult is empowered by the central bankers that are based in London.
Who do you see as the major players in this Jewish Illuminati satanic cult that are manipulating the world these days?
You know, the Rothschilds, the Warburgs, the Rockefellers, who I suspect are crypto Jews. A crypto Jew is someone who's Jewish but pretends to be something else, takes the role of the Christian. I'm a Jew. I don't think Jews are aware of this. The nature of a satanic cult is that the everyday members, the rank and file, are not let in on the agenda.
Makow has written several books on this alleged Jewish Illuminati conspiracy. His theories mirror the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is widely considered an anti-Semitic conspiracy book published in the 19th century.
I think Jews need to realize that the Protocols of Zion are in fact authentic and represent a potential threat to their security.
Makow claims this Jewish satanic cult has allegedly spread its tentacles to Canada as well.
The main fundraiser for the Conservative Party of Canada, I think, is Irving Gerstein, and Jewish, and he probably brings in millions for them. I'm not sure whether Stephen Harper's a crypto Jew or not. There are some indications that he might be.
I spoke to a gentleman, his name's Henry Makow, and he's convinced that the Canadian government is dominated by this world Jewish conspiracy of bankers and media moguls, primarily out of London, and that maybe even Stephen Harper could be Jewish. So could you tell us, is there a conspiracy going on?
Well, first of all, it would be news to Stephen Harper that he's Jewish. And secondly, here's the ironic reality. Stephen Harper hardly knew anyone in the Jewish community before he became prime minister. These conspiracy theories, one of the marvelous things about them is that, for the theorists, is that they're almost impossible to disprove. The moment you deny the theory, you become part of it. And that's the crazy, endless, dark cycle of conspiracy theorism.
70 years after the Holocaust, the anti-Semitic conspiracy of evil Jewish lobbies and bankers is coming back to life.
Big real estate in the United States is Jewish. Wall Street, Hollywood. They've got it all covered.
And the Zionists will no longer control our Congress, and that will be a very happy day for all of us.
Everything Obama is saying is to appease the lobby, because that's where all the money is flowing from.
Jews have destroyed America. They've destroyed Canada. Jews are the power group in America.
The majority of British members of parliament are members of a Friends of Israel Society.
You will be blackmailed of being anti-Semitic if you don't do what they want.
The war in Iraq and now the push for a war in Iran on behalf of this lobby is harmful to the U.S.
War is a Jew harvest.
The Jewish collective that orchestrated 9/11 did so to create endless wars in the Middle East, which also creates a lot of money.
There is a conspiracy of bankers, armies. The Zionist component is certainly there.
The financial crisis, which is engineered by the biggest fraudsters and criminals of all, the Rothschilds family, the banksters.
I'd have rounded up all those international bankers and the Rothschilds and Warburgs and put them in a concentration camp or something.
You let me on mainstream TV, I guarantee I can make the case for Jews being exterminated, and you won't find anybody but a handful of nuts who says otherwise.
And just transpose that to somebody saying that about blacks, or somebody saying that about gays, or somebody saying that about any other group. Immediately you'd see the bigotry. But if you say it about Jews, and especially if you use the word Zionist instead of Jews, you're immune, you're exempt.